All right, I'll be going over the top 10 albums of January 2026 here. A little bit delayed. I've been working on the top 50 of last year and just haven't been getting it done the last few weeks. So we're just going to cut right into January for now and get some of these out of the way for the sake of time. So it was a pretty decent January for new releases. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of decent records that didn't necessarily get a lot of love from me, but are still worth talking about. I don't know that I'd be out there shouting from the rooftop that there's a new Creator or Megadeth record, but it's cool that those things exist. I think it's the last one from Megadeth and probably one of the more commercial records from Creator in a while. Otherwise, I think you should check out the new Nergal record. I think it's a solid example of what Hellenic black metal was and is, as well as I think the Ruins of Bevrast record is pretty quality. It's just a little bit too attuned to gothic metal. I'm increasingly not interested in yet another take on gothic metal from a band that didn't really start there. So not really my thing, but a quality record that was made well. I am, of course, a huge fan of most everything the band has done, and I really liked what they were doing on the last record. But here it's a little bit beyond the pale. Otherwise, here is the top 10 at a glance, and you'll find there was kind of an expected amount of extreme metal here on in order, and most of it being death metal or black metal from my purview. We start here at number 10 with Sanctus de l'Abîme de Alpleron. And this is a solo project from the fellow behind Gevura, and this is a good example of aggression applied to the kind of Montreal black metal sound, the Quebec black metal sound. This is maybe a little bit less aggressive than the previous record and more focused on fluid melodic black metal style, and the guitar work is really what stands out here. Well worth mentioning, worth checking out. At number 9, we have the second full-length album from Australian death doom metal band Malignant Aura, where all of Worth Comes to Wither focuses a little bit more on death metal riffs and death metal aggression, and less on the sort of meandering post-metallic atmosphere that was on that first record. So a much cooler record, a solid kind of messier textural form of death doom. After many years, Deathrazor have returned with Forged in Hatred, a more professional album, something that it sounds a bit better in its production values. It's been written with a little bit more care, but ultimately we're still getting an underground old school thrash metal record in kind of the brutal thrash metal style from these guys, and that means it's heavily influenced by Sepultura, Morbid Saint, and bands like that, which are all about the riffs and aggression and commanding that old school style with a little bit more extremity applied. Maybe not the most memorable record, but still very good. The third full-length album from Birmingham, Alabama-based death metal band Ectovoid kind of reverts a little bit to their most traditional old school sound, but also it keeps that incantation-esque aggression to it, that atmosphere to it. And they've done well to incorporate quite a lot of variety into their both songwriting and expression. I think the vocalist is standout here for the most part, and there's riffs in every song. It's a solid album. Another old school death metal album with plenty of riffs in hand comes from Japanese group Invictus. This is a little bit of an unexpected record from the Nagano-based trio in the sense that it really is much more aggressive than expected. It is varietal in some sense, and it's very well produced. There's something very strong and upfront about this record, which is very easy to get into as a fan of old school death metal and the permutations beyond its earlier existence. Pretty straightforward recommend here. It's just a great old school death metal album. The latest and potentially final record from Serpent Column, Ion of Strife, is definitely something a little bit more loose and meandering and kind of enraged after Tassel of Ares, and I think that it's cool that they did something a little bit different, something a little bit messier and expressive, and I think that's reflected in the way that they presented it in every sense. It'll be interesting to see what Theophanos does next, but it sounds like Serpent Column, that he's shutting the door on it for now. I think Wastelands is something that specifically appeals to me in the sense that it's got a little bit of that blackened thrash metal attitude to it. It's got some aggression in there, but it is essentially a power thrash metal record otherwise. That means the vocals are melodic theatrical in some sense and convey a theme. And there's a lot of energy to this record that feels loyal to the old school ways, but also has this kind of newer hybrid feeling to it that is inspired and just good as a heavy metal album with catchier songs. St. Petersburg, Russia-based death metal band Void Monuments kind of took me by surprise with this record. This debut, Posthumous Imprecation, is very much traditional. It's kind of brutal. It's immediate and aggressive, and it kind of reminds me of where the real shit is. Even though I talk about old school death metal all the time, there are bands that just have something a little extra on everyone else in terms of the way that they both pull from obvious influences, but also have something that is more immediate, intense, and kind of deadly in the way that they present it. And I think this band has that in the way they've put together this record. It feels like an underground record, more importantly, and it's not too polished, it's not too perfect. The way that Belarusian duo Ex Imperatus have expanded upon what they introduced on their previous record, considerable in the depth that it applies to that. There's some emotional resonance in there. There's obviously a story behind the lyrics and where they're coming from. Otherwise, it's a cool, brutal death metal record. It's not fully brutal, it's not fully experimental, and I think in the review I compare it a little bit to Afterbirth in the way that they're flitting between different ideas but still keeping it very direct and aggressive and doing their own thing. At number one, Oraculum's Hybris Divina is maybe for some people a little bit too late. They took a really long time to put out this record, and they kind of had a lot of their momentum quite a few years ago. But for me, they've been able to work in both atmospheric ideas and kind of the pure old school death metal ideas. It's a merger of two worlds that makes a lot of sense and produces a kind of spaced out surreal death metal with a very aggressive edge to it that veers into blackened death metal here and there. It's an ambitious record for this style, and it's one that I kept coming back to because it was both unique and just well put together as a total package. It was something I thought was worth buying. So that's my best of the month for January. Go ahead and check out all those records and see if that's your deal. Follow on social media, subscribe on YouTube, all that stuff. That all helps me out if you'd like to see more of these videos.